After competing with Tesla for years, Ford decided to take on a new rival, and it's none other than Rivian. In its latest announcement, company CEO Jim Farley directly challenged the small-time startup and stated how the legacy car maker plans to defeat Rivian at its own game. Keep watching to find out exactly what Farley said. Jim Farley recently went after Rivian's strategy concerning EV fans. Even though the startup has been backed by big players like Fomaco, it seems like Rivian is yet to win the trust of Ford CEO. Farley was asked his opinion about Rivian's van strategy at the automaker's 2023 Capital Markets Day presentation, and here's what he had to say. The CEO started off by pointing out that Rivian only has one customer, and that's Amazon. Likewise, they have one van for delivery. 95% of the commercial industry is small, medium-sized businesses with like 1,000 different locations. Farley wasn't impressed by the company's latest product delivery either. He thinks that FedEx and UPS are great. But if Jim was in the shoes of a customer, he'd want to go with the plumber that has 5 vans. Rivian's one product situation doesn't entirely inspire confidence. To make it worse, Rivian doesn't even have a fleet manager or the time to go to a dealer. Compare that to the big guns in the industry, and they've got fleet managers and their fleets are overserved. Many might think that the CEO's comments come across as antagonizing, but Farley was bold enough to share his own 2 cents with Rivian CEO RJ Scarnage. Jim asked him straight up if he really wanted to bet on Amazon. The Ford CEO wanted him to go after real customers, but it seems like Scarnage had already made up his mind as he paid no heed to its competitors' words and did what he thought was best for the company. Still, it looks like Ford has little faith in the startup's abilities, as on February 8, 2023, the Detroit manufacturer reduced its shares in the company to 1.15%. This is a striking contrast to Ford's stake in 2021, which was 11.4%. 2022 was an especially hard year for the startup, as Rivian lost 82% of its stock value, which was particularly disappointing for investors who regarded Rivian as one of the most valuable automakers in the game. 2023 wasn't off to a great start either, as the California-based manufacturer announced plans to reduce costs by cutting back 6% of its workforce. The news came in the middle of a worsening economic crisis, one that plagues the rest of the automotive industry as well. However, Rivian's situation is particularly bad as the manufacturer missed production goals. To make matters worse, Rivian has been reporting a loss on every vehicle that has been produced so far. In these circumstances, CEO Jim Farley decided it was best to cut the company's losses as he pulled back investment. Ford pulling back has only put an end to a partnership that began all the way back in 2019, starting with the legacy automaker investing $500 million in the startup. Both companies shared the same vision for sustainability mobility and were supposed to work together to achieve that dream. What's more, Ford also had plans about using Rivian's electric architecture for its benefit. The technology would have helped the company in manufacturing its own EVs. Other plans including the number 2 EV seller taking over Rivian's manufacturing plant in Illinois. However, those plans never came to fruition as Ford announced its decision to move away from Rivian. It's worth noting that Rivian was not always on the losing side of things. During its earlier days, Rivian was particularly successful in the market. In fact, Rivian's IPO in November 2021 was reporting huge profits. Ford managed to make $12 billion during those days, making it the biggest public offering. The only company to match that number has been Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook. Hailed as the new Tesla, the hype around Rivian was off the charts. Everyone wanted in on the action, and shares doubled within the first week of trading. However, celebrations for the Californian automaker lasted only for a short while before trouble came knocking. Weeks later, Ford announced plans about not working with Rivian on a truck, which proved to be a fatal blow to the company's newfound success. Stocks dropped by 17% in a single day. Rivian tried to bounce back by announcing plans for a second factory, but it failed to earn the trust of its investors as it reported disappointing initial sales. It proved to be another blow that sent Rivian stocks declining about by 10% in a single day. And so, as of 2021 ended, Rivian shares were 40% lower than from that week after the IPO. Still, Ford was happy with its profit of $9.1 billion that year. However, the start of 2022 was a different story as the stocks dropped by 70% in the first quarter. Ford suffered a loss of $3.1 billion net loss, and was forced to take $5.4 billion pre-tax charge. While that explains Ford's decision to cut off Rivian, there's another angle to Ford competing in the small-time startup. As the number 2 EV seller in the States, Ford's always had one goal, and that's to dethrone Tesla. Despite the company's efforts, dethroning the EV giant is not as easy as it seems. In fact, in its efforts to pursue electrification and beat Tesla as its own game, the legacy automaker has suffered some serious losses. The company reported losing $3 billion before taxes during the past 2 years and is projected to lose even more throughout the year. That said, Ford needed to think about pulling back from the race and focusing on cutting back its losses, all the while still wowing the market. And that's where Rivian comes in. By competing with rising talent in the industry, Ford plans to prove itself to both investors and consumers. Question is, how does Ford plan to do that exactly? The company's electric division announced plans about working on a prototype 3-row crossover, one that directly compete with Rivian's R1S. The 7-seater will be competing in the large SUV departments, which is what Ford's good at. Though Ford hasn't always focused on competing with Tesla, it prioritized doing so by offering a unique lineup of its own instead of just copying Tesla. Ford's F-150 Lightning was a welcome addition to the market that was swarmed by small-sized EVs. Farley's well aware of this, as he brought up to the point in front of analysis during the company's Q1 2023 earnings. He explained how there's already an overabundance of 2-row electric SUVs on the market, with more on its way. If this keeps up, according to estimates, there will be 45 2-row electric SUVs on the market by 2025. Of course, with the market saturation, the chances of companies making it as big are slim, with consumers choosing Tesla most of the time. That said, Ford has worked out a strategy to bring in customers, and it's by offering customers a 3-row EV. It's a segment in which Tesla is yet to step in, though Rivian has already had the ROS1 on the market. Farley highlighted how many of the people who bought the F150 Lightning truck had never owned a truck before. The Michigan-based manufacturer is confident about landing in a similar situation with 3-row electric vehicles. Ford believes that its years of knowing customers' preferences when it comes to pickup trucks will help the automaker get in front of the game, all the while dominating a niche segment of the market. It will mean overperforming Rivian's RS1 that is currently hailed as the second most powerful SUV in the market. Of course, Ford's decision to pursue these plans will not be without losses, at least in the initial days. However, it's at risk that the company is willing to take, since the automaker is optimistic about its EVs hitting a profit margin of 8% by 2026, especially with the integration of a second-generation platform. At the same time, it's worth pointing out that Rivian is not drowning, contrary to the picture that the Ford CEO is painting. Sure, the startup fleet is limited to 1 van at the moment, but Rivian has a few plans in the pipeline to expand its lineup. Rivian did have a contract with Mercedes-Benz in this regard, but it fell through. And so now the company is focusing on marketing its product to a larger customer base, and many suspect that Rivian's decision might be fueled by the fact that Amazon is planning to scrap its exclusive contract with Rivian after the multinational company failed to purchase the agreed upon number of vans given sales-related budget cuts. Whether Rivian can bounce back from its plunging stocks and whether Ford manages to beat it in the 3-row segment remains to be seen. That's all for today. Until next time.